Imagine a time when vast lands were unknown, their mysteries whispered in hushed tones. This was Africa in the late 19th century, a continent ripe for exploration and, unfortunately, exploitation. European powers, hungry for resources and prestige, embarked on a race to claim African territories. This period, marked by fierce competition and ruthless ambition, is known as the Scramble for Africa. European nations, once content with coastal trading posts, now sought to control entire regions. This sudden rush for African land was driven by a potent mix of economic, political, and social factors. These motivations, intertwined and complex, propelled Europe into a frenzy of colonial conquest. The consequences of this scramble were far-reaching, leaving an indelible mark on Africa's people, culture, and destiny. Understanding this period is crucial to comprehending the complexities of Africa's past and its present-day realities. At the heart of the scramble lay a powerful economic engine. Europe's industries were booming, and Africa, with its abundance of raw materials, was an irresistible target. Rubber, diamonds, gold, ivory, and other valuable resources were ripe for extraction, promising immense wealth to colonial powers. European factories craved these resources to fuel production and expand their empires of commerce. The quest for cheap labor to extract these resources further fueled the colonial project. Africans were often forced into servitude, subjected to harsh conditions and meager wages. This exploitation formed a dark underbelly of the economic motivations for the scramble. The promise of untapped markets in Africa also enticed European industrialists. They saw a captive market for their manufactured goods, imagining a future where African consumers fueled their growing economies. This pursuit of resources and markets transformed Africa into a vast economic engine for European powers. Beyond economics, the scramble was a high-stakes game of political chess. European nations, vying for dominance on the world stage, saw colonial possessions as a measure of power and prestige. Each land grab in Africa was a strategic move, enhancing a nation's standing and influence. Rivalries between European powers intensified the scramble. Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Portugal, and others competed fiercely, each determined to outmaneuver the others and claim the largest share of the African pie. This competition often led to tension and conflict, with nations jostling for the most strategically valuable territories. Control over key geographical locations, such as waterways and trade routes, became paramount. The Suez Canal, a vital link between Europe and Asia, became a focal point of this struggle. Its control was seen as crucial for economic and military dominance, further fueling the scramble for territories in East Africa. Section 4. Explorers and their trails. Mapping the unknown. The exploration of Africa's interior played a crucial role in shaping European perceptions and fueling the scramble. Explorers, driven by a mix of scientific curiosity, adventure, and imperial ambition, ventured into the continent's uncharted territories. David Livingstone, a Scottish missionary and physician, became a legendary figure. His explorations of the Zambezi River and his search for the source of the Nile captivated European audiences. These expeditions, while presented as scientific endeavors, often paved the way for colonial expansion. Henry Morton Stanley, a Welsh-American journalist, further fueled the flames of European interest. His search for Livingstone and his subsequent explorations, funded by colonial powers, opened up new territories for exploitation. These expeditions, documented in books and newspapers, fed the European imagination and reinforced the image of Africa as a land ripe for conquest. Section 5. The Berlin Conference, Dividing the Spoils. The competition for Africa reached its peak with the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885. This event, orchestrated by European powers without African representation, aimed to regulate the colonization and trade in Africa. The conference formalized the process of carving up Africa among European powers. It established the principle of effective occupation, meaning that a European nation could claim a territory if it could demonstrate control over it. This led to a scramble for treaties with African leaders, often obtained through coercion or deception. The Berlin Conference formalized the arbitrary borders that continue to shape Africa today. These lines, drawn without regard for existing ethnic, linguistic, or cultural boundaries, have left a legacy of division and conflict. It solidified Europe's dominance over Africa, ushering in an era of unprecedented colonial rule. Section 6. Life under the colonial shadow, the impact on Africa. The consequences of the scramble were profound and far-reaching for African societies. Traditional ways of life were disrupted as Europeans imposed their own systems of governance, education, and religion. Economically, Africa was transformed into a source of raw materials and a market for European goods. This exploitation hindered the development of local industries and led to economic dependence on colonial powers. African farmers were often forced to grow cash crops for export, neglecting traditional subsistence agriculture and making them vulnerable to fluctuations in global markets. The imposition of European languages and educational systems eroded traditional knowledge systems. African languages and cultures were often suppressed, replaced with European counterparts. This cultural imperialism had a lasting impact on African identities and perceptions of their own history. Section 7. The Legacy of Colonialism. Echoes of the Scramble. The scramble for Africa cast a long shadow over the continent. The arbitrary borders drawn during this period continue to fuel ethnic and political tensions. The economic systems put in place during colonization left many African nations struggling to achieve economic independence. The legacy of colonialism is complex and multifaceted. While some argue that it brought advancements in infrastructure and education, others point to the devastating impact on African societies and the enduring legacy of economic exploitation. However, it is important to remember that Africa's story did not end with colonization. Across the continent, movements for independence emerged, challenging colonial rule and eventually leading to the liberation of African nations. Understanding the scramble for Africa is crucial for comprehending the challenges and opportunities that Africa faces today as it continues to grapple with the complexities of its past and strives towards a brighter future.